So this topic is about packaging of pharmaceuticals. Uh, what we have in our syllabus is a general concept of package and its component, which includes the primary and the ancillary packs. Then some materials like glass, plastics, metals, rubber, and paper. Again, types of container and closures. QC test involved in the containers, and then a brief idea about adhesives and printing inks. Now, before starting with the chapter, we'll first go through some terminologies or definition involved in the packaging. So, the first is the packaging. Packaging is nothing but the outer protective covering of a product in which the product is enclosed in such a way that it becomes easy or convenient to handle the product. So, if we are talking about a tablet, the tablet is enclosed either in a glass bottle or in strips, so it becomes very easy to handle a tablet. Like in case of liquids, it is to be enclosed in a bottle. So pharmaceutical packaging is nothing but a combination of components which are used or which is necessary to contain, that means to keep, to preserve, to protect, and to deliver a safe efficacious drug product such that the drug product will be in the same form in terms of safety and efficacy till the expiry date of the drug. In short, packaging must provide protection against the climatic condition, against biological, that is microorganism, then physical, temperature, oxygen, water, etc., chemical hazards, and must be economical. Must ensure that adequate stability of the drug product is maintained throughout the shelf life. Next is we'll be constantly coming across these two terms, that is containers and the closures. So these are the two components of a packaging system. So container is a device which will hold and maintain the quality, safety and stability of the medicinal product. So it is nothing but, you can say, a bottle, then a can, or a collapsible tube. Okay, so a closure is nothing but which will seal the container to protect the contents from contamination which is caused by solids, moisture or microorganism. So in short, you can say the cap of the bottle is the closure, the vial of ampule is a closure. So container is a device which will hold, and closure is a device which will seal the container. Now closure will also prevent loss of contents due to evaporation and degradation, and both the container and the closure serves as a means of identification of the product, and it will also allow convenient handling and transportation of the product. Now why this term identification of the product is mentioned? If you see that we know that the paracetamol strip is blue in color. So even if we don't read it and we know the say the tablet size and the type of packaging which is used, we can identify the product. So in that ways, this container and closure will be helpful in identification of the product. Next term is material of construction. This is nothing but the material which is used for preparing a container or a closure. So it can be glass, it can be plastic, resins, metals. Then next term is the packaging component. Component is a single part of the container closure system. So component can be a container, it can be the liner, closure, closure liners, then over seals, we can have inner seals, then administration ports, that is nothing but the one which is used for LVPs or large volume parenterals, over wraps, then administration accessories, that is nothing but the you can say the cap which is provided with the or the measuring cap which is provided with the syrups and all, then container labels. So these are the individual components of a packaging system. Next term is the primary packaging component. This is nothing but a component which is in direct contact with the dosage form. So if we talk about a syrup is in direct contact with the bottle. So a glass bottle becomes the primary packaging material. The main aim of the primary package component is to protect against the environmental conditions, chemical, mechanical, or any other hazards. Secondary packaging component is a component that will not be in direct contact with the dosage form. So it will provide an additional protection during the warehousing, and it may also provide information about the drug product. For example, leaflets. Now, if I take an example of syrup again, because that is what you have in your syllabus, monophasic liquid dosage forms, so I'll take the liquids again. So, bottle is a primary component. The carton of the bottle will be the secondary component. So, it will provide an additional protection, plus it will provide the information uh, about the drug or the dosage form which is present inside the pack. Then last is about the tertiary packaging. This is the outer packaging of the secondary packaging. So it is generally for the handling or shipping purpose. We can have barrels, crate, containers, pallets, and slip sheets for this purpose. Now again, to summarize this in a diagrammatic form, the dosage form here is a tablet. The tablet is having a primary packaging in the form of strip. This strip is there in a small box, or you can say a carton, and then this number of cartons will be packed in the boxes for the shipping purpose. So we have the dosage form in the primary packaging material, and then we have the primary pack in the secondary pack, and then finally the tertiary pack. Next we come to container closure system. So this is nothing but the sum of the packaging component that will together contain and protect the dosage form. So this will include both the primary packaging and the secondary packaging. Now packaging system will be equivalent, or it will be same as the container closure system. Now this slide is about the packaging or the classification of packaging. So we have the primary packaging material, secondary packaging material, and the tertiary packaging material. So primary packaging material will be different for different dosage forms. Like in case of tablets or capsules, we have it in the form of blister, strip, glass bottles, or plastic bottles. In case of liquids, again depending upon the type, whether it is oral or parenteral, it will be vial, ampule, bottles. Then in case of powders or granules, it will be in the form of foil, paper, pouch, plastic bottles, semi-solids in the form of collapsible tubes, suppositories in the form of film wrappers, and pressurized containers for aerosol. So these are the primary packaging material, and the secondary packaging for all the dosage form will be of paper and boards or cartons. Similarly, for shipment purpose or during the transportation purpose, we have tertiary packaging material in the form of boxes. That may be the cardboard boxes or wooden boxes. Next term is a package or market package, which refers to the container closure system, along with the labeling and the associated components. Like in case of liquids, what we have is dosage cups, droppers in case of eyes and eardrops, then spoon, and the external packaging, that is the cartons. Then we'll summarize the need for packaging. So we need packaging for identification, for presentation, and for information of the drug product. I will compile all the points which we have discussed in the earlier slides, and will uh, come to the importance of packaging. So the first importance is it will protect the dosage form or the product from all adverse external influences which can alter the property of the drug. It will protect against the biological contamination or the microbiological contamination, physical damage that will include the temperature, the oxygen uh, protection. Then it will also carry information regarding the dosage form, how it is to be taken, then the identification of the product. Apart from this, what we have are special packages which are called as tamper evident, child resistance, and anti counterfeiting. So tampering is nothing but uh, uh, there are some tampering of products that leads to damage or mixing, interfering, which is called as unauthorized alteration. So if at all that is done, that is you can say visible with the help of if we have a tamper evident packaging. So if tampering or a mixing is done, then that closure or the container will be damaged and we can very well identify that the package is being tampered. Then we have child resistance. That means the drugs generally the should be kept away from the children, but there are some packages which are like bottles and all, which can have special opening arrangements, so that will make the op- opening child resistance. Then anti counterfeiting is nothing but the fake bottles or the fake formulations which can be uh, made by some other company or misbranded product. Next, we come to functions of packaging. So the first important function is containment or keeping the product inside the container. Apart from that, the container should not allow leaking, diffusion, or permeation of the product. It should be strong enough to hold the content whenever the product is or whenever the package is subjected to normal handling condition. That means during the handling it should not allow any breakage or damage for the to the product. Also, it should not be altered, like the package should not package should not be altered by the ingredients of the formulation. Next important function is protection. So the packaging must protect the product against all the adverse reaction or influences which will affect the quality and the potency of the formulation. So this protection will include protection against light, moisture, oxygen, biological contamination, and mechanical damage. Now, other than containment and protection, packaging will also allow or be useful in identification of the product and preparation of the product if it is required. Like some products they require dilution, some may require reconstitution. So the information about how it is to be reconstituted, how much volume is to be put for reconstitution, what is the solvent which is used for reconstitution, all these things are mentioned in the package. It is also used for mentioning the precautions of a particular medicine. Then it gives an information about storage and the shelf life of the product, and uh, if at all the product is to be disposed of after a certain period of time, like in case of eye drops or nasal drop, it is to be disposed of after 1 week of opening. So that point is to be mentioned, or it is always there in the package. Now this completes with the function of packaging. An important point which is to be remembered that is that we have to always check for compatibility of the packaging material with the component inside the packaging, that is the formulation and the packaging material. So as I said in the earlier slide that there are two components, that is the container and the closure. So first we'll be dealing with the containers. So the first part in this is the ideal requirement of the container. So the requirements are it should have enough strength to withstand the physical and the mechanical stress during the handling. It should protect the product from changes in the temperature, humidity, and light, and also from the gases and the airborne particulate matter. Now, there are some products which are sterilized after packaging, say parenterals. So, in that case, the container should withstand the temperature and pressure which is used for sterilization of the product, and it should maintain the sterility of the product. Next requirement is that it should not release its component into the product, that is from the packaging to the product. Like in case of glass, glass may release soluble alkaline material into water which is used as solvent in the formulation. It should not prevent loss or gain of water along with the prevention of loss of volatile ingredients which are present in the formulation. Also, it should hold the content inside without leaking, spillage, or permeation. It should not interact physically or chemically with the contents. Next requirement is that the closure which is used for the container, it should be removed easily and it should be replaced. Then next is whatever container is used, you should be able to take out the doors from the container. The labeling should be easy, should be economical and elegant. The material used for the for preparing the container should be FDA approved, that is Food Drug Administration approved. Then it should meet the tamper resistant requirement if at all it is applicable. And last uh, point with reference to the you can say manufacturing aspect, so it should be adaptable to the commonly employed high speed packaging equipments. So it should not break, it should fall in line with the equipment procedures, equipment say the process which is used for packaging. Next, we come to the classification of the containers. Now, this classification is based upon the doses, as whether it is giving a single dose or a multiple dose. So, based on that, we'll classify the containers. So, the first classification is single dose container. So, this is particularly for the parenteral preparations. So, it will hold a particular, that is a single dose of the drug. The example is a vial, ampule, or a pre-filled syringes. Next classification is a multiple dose container. So this is again related with parenteral. The example is vial. Now there are some vials which will allow multiple dosing. So this comes under a multiple dose container. Then we have a unit dose container. Now these are nothing but the preparations or the formulations which are given other than the parenteral route, but they are unit dose, they have a unit dose which is to be administered. Next is multiple unit containers. This will include tins, jars, pouches, bottles, which will permit withdrawal of the successive portion of the content without changing the strength and the purity of the remaining portion. So I'll explain this with the example of liquid. So if at all you have a syrup, you take the required quantity of the dose one time, you close it, and then it will remain, or it will keep the product as it is in the form of in the given strength or purity. Next is the well closed container, the container which protects the contents from contamination from the solids, liquids, from the loss of drug during the ordinary condition handling conditions, storage conditions, and the distribution of the drug. Next type is a tightly closed container which protects the contents from contamination by extraneous liquids, solids, and vapors, or loss or deterioration of the articles or the product from the effervescence, deliquescence, that is becoming liquid, a product becoming liquid by absorbing water, or evaporation under normal condition of storage, handling, shipment and distribution. Now, if at all you are using a tightly closed container, it should maintain its property even after it is used or it is opened. Next type is the airtight container, in which uh, this type of container is impermeable to solids, liquids and gases under ordinary conditions of handling, transport and storage. Now, if at all you say that it is an airtight container, again it should maintain that property even after opening. Next type is light resistant containers, which will protect the contents from the effects of actinic light. Actinic light is nothing but the light which will cause photo degradation or degradation due to light. So this protection will be because of the material or specific material which is added in the container. Alternatively, so like this is one, like we have heard about amber colored glass. So amber color glass will provide protection against light. Alternatively, if we are using a clear and colorless or translucent container, we can make it light resistant by adding a opacifying agent and keeping the container in dark place. So in that case, we have to mention the storage condition. Next type of container is a tamper evident container. So this container is fitted with a device or mechanism that reveals that the contents of the container has been tampered. So this table shows the type of container and the type of dosage form which can be filled in the container. So like we take an example of plain white or amber screw capped round glass or plastic bottle. We can fill oral liquids, pediatric drops, and again it has a calibrated dropper along with the container. Then we take the example of say fluted screw capped glass or plastic bottles. So fluted, that means it is not to be consumed or taken internally. So type of dosage form will be gargles, mouthwash or inhalation. Then we have plastic squeeze bottle. Closure should be covered with a readily breakable seal. So this type of container will be helpful in filling the sterile dusting powders. Next we come to the packaging material or the materials which are used to make the containers. Now this is an important part. So this can like either a complete question can be asked or individual packing material can be asked. So what you have to write is the properties, advantages, disadvantages and type, if any, of the material used. The first material is the glass, most popular and commonly used material in pharmaceutical industry. So it's the first choice of packaging material. We'll come to the advantages. With the glass, we can ensure inertness, visibility, rigidity, and durability. Also, it is impermeable to moisture and gases. We can have colored glasses, so that will protect the formulation against light whenever the protection is required. Then the glass bottles are or the glass containers are available in variety of shapes and size, and it has FDA clearance that and it is easy to clean. Also, glass can withstand the sterilization temperature and pressure, and it will not deteriorate with age. But there are few disadvantages of glass. The first disadvantage is that it is heavy or bulky, so the transportation is difficult. Second is it is fragile, so it can break. It is expensive. And last is if it alkaline glass may react with the product and they may induce the chemical reaction, that is the packaging material may react with the components of the formulation. Then next we come to the composition of glass. So glass principally is made up of silica, that is about 59 to 80%. Other than that, it has varying degree of calcium oxide, sodium oxide, aluminium oxide, barium oxide, boric oxide, potassium oxide, and magnesium oxide. Now, the high melting point of glass, due to which it can be heated and molded in various shapes and size, is because of the presence of silica. The melting point and the melt viscosity of the glass can be modified by addition of various oxide or by using combination of oxides which is mentioned. Now IP classifies glass into four types. This is very important from the exam point of view and also from GPAT point of view. So what you have to remember is the name, the properties and the uses. Only composition when it comes to type 2, why it is important or why it is different from the other. So 2 ka composition you have to remember, and others you have to remember the properties and the uses along with the name. So we'll start with type 1, which is called as borosilicate glass. It is highly resistant glass. It has reduced leaching property. Leaching will discuss in the subsequent slides. Then chemically it is inert and it possesses high hydroelectric resistance due to the presence of boric oxide. It has a lowest coefficient of expansion and has high thermal shock properties, and it is used for preparing a glass apparatus, lab which are used in laboratories, for waterfall injections, for buffered and unbuffered aqueous solutions and powders. Now coming to type 2 glass, which is called as treated soda lime glass. Now this uh, is different from the soda lime glass, which is type 3 glass. It is called as treated. Now why it is called treated is because it is treated with sulfur. So sulfur treatment, it will neutralize the alkaline oxides which are present in the on the present on the surface of the glass, and thereby it will make the glass more chemically resistant. So the property will be, it will have high hydroelectric resistance, it will have lower melting point, so it will be easy to mold. It is used for buffered solution with pH below 7 and for dry powders and for products which are alkali sensitive. Infusion fluids, blood plasma and large volume containers are prepared by using this type of glass. Next we come to type 3 or regular soda lime glass. It has average chemical resistance. The flakes separate easily and it may crack due to sudden change in temperature. It is generally used for dry or oily products, for topical use and for oral use, but it is not used for preparing ampules. Then we have type 4 or non-parental glass. It is also called as general purpose soda lime glass. It has high hydraulic resistance, lower melting point, so it is easy to mold. Again, it will be used for non-parental products and for those products which are for oral and topical use. Then other than this, we have neutral glass whose who has lower cost than the borosilicate glass. They are softer and hence they can be molded easily. They are used to prepare small vials which are having capacity of about 25 ml, and also for large transfusion bottles. that is the one which stores the blood products. Next we have colored bottles. The main constituent is glass plus iron oxide. So you can say amber color glass is a type of colored glass. So it has iron oxide in it. So it can resist UV radiations starting from 290 to 450 nanometers. So it is used for photosensitive products. Now this picture shows a variety of glass bottles, right from ampoules to vials, bottles, wide mouth bottles, narrow mouth bottles. So you can see that glass is a material of construction for bottles, ampoules and vials. Next we come to the QC test for glass. So the first is protection from light. So this is important for the drugs which needs protection against light. So colorless glass, it permits the transmission of UV light and it accelerates the photolytic degradation of the content. So amber colored glass, that is the one which contains ferric oxide, it transmits above 470 nanometers, so which is a very effective way in protecting the contents from photodegradation. Next is the leakage test. uh, in this, the drug is filled in the container and it is kept inverted in the colored solution. The colored solution is generally methylene blue, and this is autoclaved at 121 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes under pressure, and later after the autoclaving is done, the contents are observed for any entry or any colored solution inside. So we classify glass into four types according to IP. Now IP suggests an hydrolytic resistant test which is used for defining the type of glass. Now in this we have two tests, that is test 1 and test 2. So test 1 is used to distinguish type 1 and type 2 glass from type 3 glass. So basically we can say we can identify type 1 and type 2 from type 3 by using test 1. Next is test 1 and test 2, that is both the tests are used when we need to determine the hydraulic resistance which is due to the chemical composition or the surface treatment. So the first test, this is determined on unused container. The number of container and the volume is given in this table. So if the capacity of the container is up to 3 ml, we have to take 20 containers, and the volume of test which is used for titration is about 25 ml. Similarly, for containers having capacity of 5 or less, the number of containers is 10 and the volume used for titration is 50 ml. If the number of nominal capacity of the container is 6 to 30, we have to take 5 containers and the volume of titration is 50 ml. If the capacity is more than 30, then we have to take 3 containers and the volume of the test of the titration is 100 ml. Now what is done is we have to remove the debris or dust from the containers by rinsing the container at least twice with water at room temperature. Now this water which is used for rinsing should be freshly prepared distilled water. Now after the rinsing is done, the rinsing time is also mentioned, that is it should not be less than 20 minutes and should not be more than 25 minutes. So after the rinsing is done, we have to fill the containers to the brim, that is the level of the container, with freshly prepared distilled water, and then again empty them and determine the average overflow volume. So in short, we have to simply determine the volume by using this step. Now if we can have ampoules, or we can have bottles or vials if we are using glass as a material. So if we are using ampoules, we have to fill it with water first, which is freshly prepared distilled water, and then seal it by using various methods. Then if it is a bottle or a vial, we have to fill up to 90% of the overflow volume and cover them with borosilicate glass or aluminium foil which is previously rinsed with distilled water. Now after this is done, the containers are placed in autoclave and they are autoclaved for 20 minutes at the temperature of 100 to 121 degrees Celsius. Now, prior to this, the air is replaced by passage of steam for 10 minutes. That is, before autoclaving, we have to uh, remove all the air or replace the air by steam. Now, after this autoclaving, we have to maintain the temperature for 60 minutes, the temperature of 121 degrees for 60 minutes, and then reduced the temperature from 121 to 100 degrees over 40 minutes. After that, after this is done, it has to be removed from the autoclave, cool, and then keep under the running tap water. Now, if we go through the 27th slide, I have mentioned the capacity of the container, then the number of containers to be taken as sample, and the volume. So that volume we have to take depending upon the capacity of the container, and then we have to add 0.15 ml of methyl red solution for each 50 ml of liquid, and then titrate with 0.01 molar hydrochloric acid, taking as the endpoint of the color, which is obtained by repeating the operation using the same volume of freshly prepared distilled water. That means we have to carry out a blank titration also. So difference between the reading of 0.01 molar hydrochloric acid required by the test and with the help of with water we have to calculate. So this table, it shows the capacity of the container and the volume of hydrochloric acid required for the titration purpose. So we can easily distinguish between the type 1, type 2 from the type 3 glass by knowing the volume of the hydrochloric acid. Now coming to test 2, the number of containers which is required as sample is again same as the one mentioned in slide number 27. Now rinse the container twice with water and then fill the container with hydrofluoric acid and allow this to stand for 10 minutes at room temperature. After this, you have to empty the containers and rinse with water 5 times. So next is carry out the procedure which is described under hydrolytic resistance, that is a titration with 0.01 molar hydrochloric acid, and then we have to compare the results which is given in table 3, that is the earlier slide. Now for type 1, the values obtained with hydrofluoric acid treated containers are closely similar to the one which is given in type 1 or type which is given for type 1 and type 2 glass, whereas for type 2 glass the value obtained with hydrofluoric acid treated containers will greatly exceed than those given in table for type 1 and type 2 glass, but are similar to those given for type 3 glass. Next is the chemical resistant test. This is according to USP, or it is official in USP. So in this also we have two tests. One is powder glass test and water attack test. Remember, water attack test is used to identify type 2 glass, and powder glass test is for the other glasses. Now powder glass test is done to estimate the amount of alkali leached from the powdered glass. Now this leaching generally increases, or it happens at elevated temperature. So what is done is the glass is powdered and it is titrated with 0.02 normal sulfuric acid using methyl red as indicator. Of course the leaching is done by using this powdered glass. So you can go through the steps. One is preparation of the glass specimen, where the containers are rinsed and then it is rinsed with the help of water, dried, and then it is grinded. So the grinded glass is passed through sieve 20 to 20 and 50 so that we get a fine powder. This Second step is the washing of specimen, wherein 10 grams of the above sample is taken into a flask and it is washed with 30 ml of acetone. Again, washing and decanting with the acetone is done, and finally it is dried uh, within 48 hours. The procedure is 10 gram of the sample, which is processed according to step 1 and step 2, is taken, and we add 50 ml of highly purified water or distilled water in a flask, and then we autoclave it at 121 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. Cool it, then decant the solution to separate the glass and the water, and then titrate with 0.02 normal sulfuric acid using methyl red as indicator, and record the volume of sulfuric acid required. Second test is a water attack test. As described earlier, it is only for type 2 or treated soda lime glass. This is done under controlled humidity conditions, which neutralizes the surface alkali and the glass becomes more resistant chemically. The principle involved is whether the alkali is leached or not from the surface of the container. So what is done is the container is rinsed thoroughly with the help of water, and then it is filled with water and autoclaved at 121 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, cooled, and then it is titrated with 0.02 normal sulfuric acid using methyl red as indicator, and then the volume of sulfuric acid which is required for the color change is noted down. If you go through the two tests which is described earlier, that is the powder attack test, powder glass test and the water attack test, the only difference is that in the first case we are grinding the glass and then treating that solution, titrating that solution with sulfuric acid. In the second case, we are filling water in the container, it may be either vial, ampule, bottle, anything. So that complete volume we are taking and titrating it with sulfuric acid after autoclaving. So next slide, this slide is about the amount of hydrochloric acid, the limit of hydrochloric acid for each type of glass. So for powder glass test, which is for type 1, 3 and 4, the limit of H2SO4 is 1 ml for type 1, 8.5 ml for type 3 and 15 ml for type 4. Whereas in case of type 2 glass, if the capacity of the container is 100 ml or less, the volume of H2SO4 required should be within the limit of 0.7 ml, and if the container capacity is more than 100 ml or over 100 ml, then the volume of H2SO4 required is should be in the limit of 0.2. Next material is plastic. It has proved very useful nowadays because of the ease with which it can be formed, the high quality and the freedom of design which it gives. Like it can be molded into various shapes and size. Also, an important advantage of using plastic is that it is resistant to breakage. So the loss of the contents which occurs with glass is very much less in case of plastics. So types of plastics like polyethylene, polypropylene, PVC, polystyrene, and to a lesser extent polyethylene terephthalate is used. Now the containers, apart from the polymers, containers, it consists of polymers. Uh, Other than the polymers, some additives can be added like antioxidant, lubricants, plasticizers, and impact modifiers. Now there are two types of plastics. One is thermoplastics and thermosets. So we'll discuss the thermoplastic first. So thermoplastics, they on heating they soften and they get converted into viscous fluid which hardens when they are cooled. They are resistant to breakage and they are very cheap to produce. And also with a right choice of plastic, we can give a necessary protection to the product. The examples of thermoplastics are polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride, polystyrene, polypropylene, polyamide, and polycarbonate. Now next class is about the thermoset plastics. So they need heat for processing into a permanent shape. Now during heating, these materials form permanent crosslinks between the linear chain, which results in solidification and loss of plastic flow, because of which they are converted into the permanent shape. Examples of this plastic include phenol formaldehyde, urea formaldehyde, and melamine formaldehyde. Next, we come to the advantages and disadvantages of plastic. So, the advantages are it is light in weight, durable, low in cost, flexible, unbreakable, odorless, and inert to most of the chemicals. Also, it is easy to transport. Disadvantages of plastic is they are permeable to vapors and gases. They absorb the constituents from the product or leach its component into the content. So either they may take something from the formulation, or they may give something to formulation. So that is called absorption and leaching. Some of them are heat sensitive and they are not suitable for sterilization, and due to electrostatic nature they may absorb some foreign particles. Now next part is about the types of plastics. So the first is polyethylene. So polyethylene is available in two forms, that is high density polyethylene and low density polyethylene. So low density polyethylene is having flexibility and stretchability, due to which it is used for squeeze bottle or droppers. Next is high density polyethylene, which is mechanically strong, stiff, and less permeable to gases, and more resistant to oil, chemicals, and solvents. And due to this property, they are mostly used in bottles and jars. Polyethylene is having all round properties, but it lacks clarity, and it is not a choice of container for volatile ingredients and oxygen sensitive drugs. Also, it absorbs preservatives from the liquids which are filled in it. Next type of plastic is polypropylene. It will not crack when you bend it. It is non-reactive against most of the organic solvent. It offers excellent resistance to strong acids and alkalis, also to heat sterilization. It shows low permeability to water vapor, so you can sterilize it without any fear of water entering into the formulation. Then it becomes brittle at low temperature, so the formulations which requires freezing or which are stored in freezer cannot be packed in polypropylene containers. They are odorless, colorless, with excellent tensile properties even at high temperature. Now, due to mechanical strength, it is used to make closures with hinges that are repeatedly open and closed. Now, this type of containers we generally see in parachute hair oil ka package. So it has hinge which we can close and open. Polypropylene is useful for closures, tablet containers, and intravenous bottles. Next example of plastic is PVC or polyvinyl chloride. Now, along with the properties which we have mentioned for polyethylene and polypropylene, one additional and good property which PVC possesses is crystal clarity. That means see through with clarity. So, whatever contents are there, we can see through clearly. Then PVC is versatile. It is easy to blend. It has sufficient strength and toughness. It is resistant to grease and oil, also to chemicals. Now with this property, it is used for preparing collapsible intravenous bags which are flexible and which collapses during the infusion process. And as it collapses during the infusion process, it do not require any air inlet system. So with this, the contamination is controlled. Now these are semi-rigid packaging material, that is PVC is a semi-rigid packaging material which do not cause full collapse of the IV bag. The only drawback is the poor impact resistance, which can be improved by adding elastomer to the plastic. Polystyrene is another type of plastic which has clarity and stiffness. It is used for its use as a packaging material is limited, but it has high permeability to water and water vapor and oxygen. It is used for jars for ointments and creams with low water content. So whatever formulation, if it if it has a low water content, you can use polystyrene as a container. Then drawback is chemicals like isopropyl myristate produce crazing. Crazing is nothing but a fine network of surface cracks which follows with weakening and eventually collapse of the container. So if you have this chemical, then ultimately what you get is a uh, damaged polystyrene container. Another example of plastic is polyamide or nylon, which is tough, heat resistant and chemically resistant plastic used for preparation of syringes, tubes, covers for surgical dressings, and it absorbs preservatives and is permeable to water vapors. Next we come to a QC test of plastics. So the first test is the leakage test. For this we randomly select 10 containers, we fill it with water and whatever is the closure we fit it, and then we keep this in inverted position at room temperature for 24 hours. After 24 hours we see for any leakage from the container. Next test is about the collapsibility test. Now this type of test is applicable for containers which are meant to be squeezed to remove the contents. So a container by collapsing inwards should yield at least 90% of the content at the required flow at the ambient temperature. Now next slide shows the QC test for plastics which are used to fill the liquid orals. Next test is the clarity of aqueous extract. Here we take a portion of the container of the particular surface area, and the part of the container should be unlabeled, unmarked and non-laminated. The first case is we have to cut the portion of the container into strips such that the total area, that is the area of both the sides, is not more than 20 centimeters square. To wash the strips by shaking with at least two separate portions of distilled water for about 30 seconds, and in each case we have to drain off the water thoroughly. So this is the first case. Second is we have to take the sample which corresponds to a surface area of about 1250 centimeters square, transfer it to the flask which is previously cleaned with the cleaning mixture, and then with several portions of water, and to this 250 ml of water is added, distilled water is added. Now cover, after this is done, you have to cover the flask and autoclave it at 121 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, and we have to take the blank by without taking the sample or the strip of the plastic material. and cool the extract and check for colorless, whether it is colorless and free from turbidity or not. For non-volatile residue, we have to take the extract which is obtained from the test for clarity of aqueous extract wala solution that is mentioned in the previous slide. We have to take 100 ml of the solution, dry it to a constant weight at 105 degrees Celsius, and the residue weigh should not be more than 12.5 mg. Now for plastic containers which are used for parenteral products, we have to perform leakage test, collapsibility test, and the test which is mentioned here, that is we have to fill the container with water and we have to close it or properly close it with the help of closure or with a aluminium sheet, and subject it to autoclave at a temperature of 121 degrees Celsius, and this is reached within 20 to 30 minutes, and again this temperature is maintained for 30 minutes. If heating at 121 leads to deterioration, heat the container at 100 degrees Celsius for 2 hours. Now this solution is used within 4 hours of preparation. Similarly, we have to prepare a blank and then test for clarity and color of the solution. Solution S should be clear and colorless. For determining the acidity and alkalinity of the container, we have to take solution S, which corresponds to about 4% of the nominal capacity of the container. To this, we have to add 0.1 ml of phenolphthalein solution. This is a colorless solution. Now titrate it again 0.01 molar sodium hydroxide. It should not, the volume required should not be more than 0.4 ml, and the solution is pink in color, that is the endpoint is pink. Now if we titrate it with 0.01 molar hydrochloric acid and 0.1 ml of methyl red solution, the volume required, the volume of hydrochloric acid required should not be more than 0.8 ml, and the solution is orange red or red in color. For light absorption, the light absorption is taken in the range of 230 to 360 nanometers. We have to prepare solution S and a blank, and the absorbance should not be more than 0.2. For reducing substance, we have to take 20 ml of solution S. To this, add 1 ml of dilute sulfuric acid and 20 ml of 0.02 molar potassium permanganate. Boil for 3 minutes, cool, then add 1 gram of potassium iodide and titrate against 0.01 molar sodium thiosulfate using 0.25 ml of starch. Similarly, we have to take the reading for blank, and the difference between the blank and the sample should not be more than 1.5 ml. For transparency, we have to take standard suspension and dilute it to 1 in 200 dilution. If we are using a polyethylene or polypropylene type of plastic as a container, and if it is other plastic, the dilution is 1 in 400 dilution. The cloudiness of the suspension is viewed through the container, and it is compared with the container which is filled with water. Next is the water vapor permeability test. Here we take 5 containers with a nominal volume of water, heat seal it, or we seal it with other suitable means. Then we weigh the container and allow it to stand for 14 days at a relative humidity of 60 plus minus 5% and temperature of 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. After 14 days, again reweigh the container and check for loss in weight. So the loss in weight should not be more than 0.2%. Next test is the biological test. This can be done by two ways, by in vitro method and by in vivo method. So in vitro test will include the plastic extract. It is placed in contact with the mammalian cell to check the toxicity. In vivo will include three tests. One is the implantation test, wherein a small piece of plastic is implanted intramuscularly in rabbit. Second is the systemic injection test. Here, solutions of plastic in sodium chloride injection with and without alcohol is injected intravenously in mice, or with polyethylene glycol 400 and sesame oil intraperitoneally in mice. Third test is by injecting all four solutions subcutaneously in rabbits, and there should not be any significant difference between the blank and the test sample. There are some possible product plastic interaction which occurs when we store the product in the plastic containers. So the first interaction is permeation. Permeation is nothing but transmission of gases, vapors or liquids through the plastic packaging material. That is, the plastic will allow permeation of gases, vapors and liquids into the formulation. Next interaction is leaching. This is plastic containers with which will have more than additives, so which are used to stabilize the plastic, will leach or migrate from the container to the drug product or the formulation. Next interaction is sorption, that is removal of drug content from the product by the packaging material. Next is chemical reaction. So this is ingredients which are used in the plastic formulation. They may react chemically with the components which are present in the formulation. Sometimes the ingredients in the formulation may also react with the ingredients in the plastic container. Fifth, the interaction is will cause alteration in the physical properties of the plastic or the product. So whatever interaction takes place may cause change in the property of plastic. Next type of container or the material used for container is metals. So metal containers are used generally for non-parenteral administration. The metals which are used is aluminium, tin plated steel, stainless steel, tin and lead. Metal is strong, opaque, impermeable to moisture, gases, odors, light, bacteria, and is shatterproof, and is an ideal packaging material for aerosols, because aerosols are having pressurized they are pressurized packages, so an they need an strong container which can withstand the pressure because of the gases present inside the aerosol. So aerosols will prefer metal containers. Then the use of metal container is diminishing, or it is limited because of its chemical reactivity, high weight and cost. For construction of jars, collapsible tubes for semi-solids, foils which are used for blister and strip packaging, metals can be used, and it form an excellent tamper evident container. So if we are tampering the product which is present in the metal container, it is easily we can find out that the tampering is done. Coming to the advantages and disadvantages of metals. So the advantages is it is mechanically strong, impermeable to light, moisture and gases, and we can directly print the label on the metal surface. The limitations include they are chemically reactive, more reactive, and they catalyze chemical reaction. they are non-transparent, they are difficult to mold in the sizes or shapes. Also, it is difficult to produce a seamless container or one piece container, because whenever we join the container, it will have that lining or the joining point, a seam. So it will not be a one piece container. Next disadvantage is that it requires coating, internal coating, if we want to prevent the interaction between the product and the container. Generally the coating is of epoxy resin. And last is the cost is high. So the first metal is the tin. So tin is generally preferred for food and pharmaceutical products, for which purity is an important consideration. Tin is generally used for preparing collapsible tubes, and it offers good appearance and compatibility with wide range of products. Next metal is aluminium. It offers significant saving in product shipping cost because of the light weight. Also, appearance wise, it is good. It is relatively light in weight, but yet it is strong. It is a good barrier. It provides good barrier to light and chemicals. Impermeable and easy to work into variety of formats. You can say shape, depending upon the thickness of the aluminium. Next metal is lead. Lowest cost, but it is generally used for non-food products like adhesives, inks, paints and lubricants. Uh, Lead is known for poisoning, so we cannot use it for packing the products which are used internally. The inner surface of the lead tubes are coated, and they may be used for products like the fluoride toothpaste. Apart from tin, aluminium and lead, stainless steel is the most commonly used metal, but these stainless steel is used for preparing large scale equipments or vessels which are used in the manufacturing area. The next part is collapsible tubes, which are generally used for packing semi solids. So containers, as the name suggests, the container will collapse when once the product is removed. So with this collapse, the risk of contamination is reduced. Aluminium is generally used for preparing this collapsible tube, which is lacquered or coated. Uh, Aluminium is lightweight, unbreakable, and it is easy to fill. We can also prepare collapsible tubes by using tin, which is inert, but it is expensive. Then lead can be also used for preparing collapsible tube. It is cheap but is poisonous. Then plastics tubes can also be plastic can also be used to prepare collapsible tube, but it has suck back property and it prevents product to ooze. But when the tube is partly empty, the empty portion gets filled with air. So with this air coming inside the formulation, there may be oxidative degradation. So it is not useful for products which degrades in presence of oxygen. Next material is paper. So paper is lightweight and economical. Paper boxes, it gives additional cushioning effect but poor protection against physical damage, moisture and water vapor. Generally, it is used for wrapping individual powders and for secondary packaging, that is preparing cartons. Now we come to the second component of packaging, that is closure. So closure seals the container and hence it is also called as stoppers or bunks. So primary function of a closure is to retain or contain the content, and with regards to safety and security is very important to prevent leakage, seepage, spillage and loss of quality and purity. So this is done by having a this can be achieved by having a proper closure. So ideal closure, it prevents exposure of the sterile product to both moisture and oxygen, thus ensures stability of the product and also prevents the contents from escaping from the container. Now coming to the requirements or ideal properties of a closure. So closure should effectively seal the container so that it will retain the contents in the container. It should protect the contents from environmental gases, microorganisms, moisture. It should be child resistant and it should avoid accidental poisoning. Then it should be easy to open and close. Should have enough mechanical strength so that it should not get damaged when it is handled repeatedly. Like we close the containers uh, in case of open and close the containers in case of liquid. So the closure which are used in the bottles should have proper strength so that it will not damage and it will maintain the integrity of the closure. Should not leach or release the components and it should not absorb or adsorb the components from the filled product. Next we come to the types of closure. So the first type is the plug. So they are push fit type closures with no screw. Generally glass or cork stoppers are used in this case. Plastics or rubbers are also used which are used to seal the dropper bottles, so which provides flexibility. They are unbreakable, they are a better fit than the cork or the glass stoppers. The next closure we have is a crown caps, what we see in our soft drinks bottle. So the diagram the picture is shown. The third type is a push fit closure. In this, the closure is pressed on the opening of the container, that is the mouth of the container. Now if the lining enters into the mouth of the container, it is called as press in, and if the mouth of the container enters in the closure, it is called as slip over. Again, say if the diameter is less than the mouth of the bottle, we can press it, and if it is more, then we have to slip over the container. Next type of closure is screw type closure. Now this we used in our bottles, glass bottles. So the neck and the cap, they have continuous threads, so that the rotation of the cap over the neck will interlock and it will close the bottle or the container properly. So these are the commonly used closures, screw type closures. So there are three parts: cap, wad and liner. So the cap, it is it is made by either aluminium, tin plate or plastic, but the thermoset plastic is preferred. Next part is the wad, which is nothing but a flexible disc of cork, rubber or plastic which is placed inside the cap. Now this wad, it ensures tight seal by overcoming sealing surface irregularities. Next we have is a liner. Liner is made up of plastic, rubber, metal foil or paper impregnated with wax. This provides barrier between the wad and the product. Next type of closure is a lug cap. Now in case of screw cap, it was having continuous threads. Now in case of lug caps, we have interrupted threads. So that will require only a small turn or a quarter turn to open and close. Now these types of closures are generally used in food industries but rarely used in pharmaceutical industry. Next type is a tamper evident closure. Now this will have an indicator or a barrier to entry, which now if at all this closure is missing or breached, then it will indicate that the container is opened and it is tampered, the product is tampered. So tamper indication may be a primary or a secondary cap. Now if you see this pictures, you can see you can have a thread band, closure thread band, the one which is shown in the left hand side picture, or the one which we have in our mineral water bottles. We have to break it to break the seal. The next type of closure is a child resistant closure. Now this will reduce the occurrence of accidental poisoning in children. Uh, these type of closures are difficult to open for most of the children which are under 5 years of age. So it will require high energy to open. It will be difficult to tear, and even if the children they keep put it in mouth and they rotate it, you cannot open it. So the funda is they will have like it will not be opened by simple rotating of the closure, but we have to say press first and then rotate. So that is the funda which makes it child resistant. Then coming to the materials for closure. So the first material is the cork. It is a wooden part obtained from oak tree. It is chemically inert, but it may absorb some of the components of the product, and therefore it is replaced by plastic or rubber nowadays. Plastics is also used as a material for closure. It is hard, translucent, thermosetting plastic based on the phenolic and urea formaldehyde. Uh, Other than this, polystyrene or polyethylene is also used. Metal closures includes metals like aluminum or tin plated, which are commonly used. Then it is used uh, to minimize the interaction between the product closure and the formulation. We generally coat it with epoxy resin. Next closure is a glass. It has limited application because it is brittle in nature and it is difficult to achieve a tight seal. Next important material for closure is rubber. So rubber closure is made of material obtained from cross-linking of elastomers with various additives. They are produced from natural or synthetic substance by either polymerization, polyaddition or polycondensation. Now the nature of the principal components and the additives which are used will decide the final properties of the finished closure. So the additives may be either vulcanizers, accelerators, stabilizing agents and pigments. Now rubber is classified into two, natural and synthetic. The natural is used for multiple use closures, uh, but it has some disadvantage, like it cannot tolerate multiple autoclaving conditions, because of which it can become brittle, and the extractable material, that is a material which goes from the rubber into the product, can increase. Then the risk of absorbing can also increase, that is both from on and into the rubber, and it has certain degree of moisture and gas permeation. Then in case of synthetic rubber, there are few additives, so the extractable level is less. Then they are less suitable for repeated insertion of needles because they tend to fragment or they give small particles into the product. The example is silicone butyl rubber, bromobutyl chlorobutyl rubber. Silicone is a less reactive and it does not experience permeability to moisture and gases. Next we come to the QC part of rubber. So this is according to IP. So IP says that there are some test procedures which has to be conducted. So to check the effectiveness of the closure, whether it is in the form of vads, plugs or caps. Now rubber closures may be elastic, it may be translucent or opaque, and the color of this will depend upon the additives which are added. So in short, they are homogeneous, practically free from flash, and the materials like fibers, foreign particles and adhering rubber pieces. Now, for performing various tests which are related with this rubber closure, we have to prepare a solution. Now, according to IP, it is called as solution A. So, how solution A is prepared is we have to wash the closure by agitation in 0.2% of anionic surface active agent for 5 minutes at room temperature. Now, we have to rinse 5 times with water. These rubber closures we have to rinse for with water, and then place the washed closure uh, in an area of about 100 centimeters square. So we need a container in which will keep the rubber closure, so that area covered with that rubber closure is about 100 centimeters square. After that, we'll add 200 ml of water per 100 centimeters square of the area, and we'll weigh it. Now the mouth of the container either may be in the form of borosilicate glass or any metal. Now this is covered with an aluminium foil, and it is autoclaved at a temperature of 119 to 123 degrees Celsius, and this temperature is reached in 20 to 30 minutes, and you have to maintain this temperature for 30 minutes. Now this temperature is reached in 30 minutes, and again we have to maintain this temperature for 30 minutes. So approximately 1 hour we have to autoclave. Next step is you have to cool to room temperature, and then make up to the original weight with the water for injection. So we have noted the weight in the second step. So if at all there is loss in the volume, we have to make up with the water for injection, and then shake and immediately separate the solution from the closure by decantation. So we'll have the rubber and the water. So what the rubber closures are separated, and the solution is taken for further analysis. In the similar manner, we can prepare a blank by using 200 ml of water for injection. Now, after preparing the test sample, that is solution A, and a blank, which is mentioned in the previous slide, we have to check for the test. The first test is the appearance of the solution. So this is compared with the opalescence and the intensity of color. Now in IP chapter 2.4.1, we'll have a series of standards which are given. So the opalescence and the colored intensity is compared with these standards. So it says that solution A should not be more opalescent than the standard OS3, and it should not be more intensely colored than the reference BYS6, which is given in chapter 2.4.1. Next test is the pH of the aqueous extract. Now to perform this, we have to take 20 ml of solution A. To this we have to add 0.1 ml of bromothymol blue and titrate it with sodium hydroxide or hydrochloric acid. So the amount of 0.001 molar sodium hydroxide required should not be more than 0.3 ml, and the color change is to blue. And if you are titrating it against hydrochloric acid 0.01 molar, the volume required should not be more than 0.8 ml, and the color change is yellow. Next test is the light absorption test. In this freshly prepared solution A, that is the solution we have to use within 4 hours, is filtered through a membrane filter having a pore size of about 0.5 microns. We have to reject the first few ml of filtrate. After that, the absorbance is measured at 220 to 360 nanometers. Now we have to take the absorbance of the test sample, that is the solution A, and the blank solution, that is nothing but water for injection. and in this case the absorbance of the solution should not be more than 2. If required, dilutions can be done so that we can get the correct absorbance of the solution. Next test is for the reducing substance. For this again, solution A is used within 4 hours of the preparation. 20 ml of solution A is taken. To this we add 1 ml of 1 molar sulfuric acid and 20 ml of 0.002 molar potassium permanganate. We boil it for 3 minutes, cool it, and then add potassium 1 gram of potassium iodide and titrate with 0.01 molar sodium thiosulfate solution using 0.25 ml of starch solution, which is added at the end of the titration. Similarly, we'll process 20 ml of blank and then we'll check the titration reading. So the difference in the titration reading should not be more than 7 ml. Next test is the residue of on evaporation. Here we evaporate 50 ml of solution A to dryness on a water bath, and we do it at 105 degrees Celsius, and the residue weight should not be more than 4 mg. Next test is sterilization test, wherein we uh, subject it to the sterilization condition, that is temperature and pressure, and then we check the uh, integrity of the rubber closure. So the rubber closure should not soften or become tacky, and it should not show any visual change in the closure. Next test is a fragmentation test. Now this is applicable for closures which are intended to be pierced by an hypodermic needle. So there are two cases. Number one, we have an aqueous preparation. Number two, we have a dry powder or a dry preparation. Now in case of aqueous preparation, if the volume of the vial is 20 ml, example, then we have to take 16 ml of water and we have to put it in the vial, close with the help of closure, and keep it aside for 16 hours. In case of dry preparations, we have to simply close with the help of closure. Next step is with the help of hypodermic needle. The dimension is given, that is the external diameter is about 0.8 mm. With the help of this needle, we have to inject 1 ml of water and we have to take out or remove 1 ml of air. Now this is done 4 times for each closure at different sides. Now this is the reason why we have taken 16 ml of water if the capacity of the vial is 20 ml, because we are going to inject 4 ml. We have to check whether the needle is blunted or not. After this, we have to remove the closure. We have to filter the water through a membrane filter having a pore size of about 0.5 microns, and in that filtrate we have to check for the fragments. Now the total number of fragments which are allowed is not more than 10, and if the closure is made up of butyl rubber, then the number of fragments should not be more than 15. Next test is self-sealability test. Now this is again used for or applicable for closures which are intended to be used with multi-dose container. In this case, 10 vials are selected which are filled with water. Now these are securely closed, and then with the help of hypodermic needle whose external diameter is about 0.8 mm, we have to pierce the closure for 10 times at 10 different places. That is 10 times at different places. After this, we have to immerse the vials upright in 0.1% weight by volume solution of methylene blue. Now methylene blue is blue in color. So we have to keep the vials in upright position in 0.1% methylene solution. Then reduce the pressure to by 27 kilopascals for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, restore the pressure and keep the vials as it is for 30 minutes. After this, we have to rinse the vials and we have to check the vials for any trace of colored solution. So what happens is, if the rubber is not having self-sealing property, the solution, the colored methylene blue solution will enter in the vial and it will give color to the solution. So this is what we have to check. So if it is sealable, there will be no methylene blue inside the container. Next part of the presentation is about adhesives and printing inks. So adhesive bonding is a process of uniting material with the help of adhesives. Adhesive is nothing but a substance capable of holding materials together by surface attachment. Generally, the adhesives are nothing but the polymers, and the primary function is to join the parts together. Three types of adhesives. One is waterborne, hot melt, solvent bond adhesives. Waterborne adhesives are the oldest and by far they are still used in packaging. Advantage is that ease and safety of handling, energy efficiency, low cost and high strength. They are classified into two, natural and synthetic. Natural includes starch, protein, animal glue, casein, natural rubber latex, and the largest class which belongs to this natural waterborne adhesives are based on starch. Next is the synthetic waterborne adhesives, which are most broadly used in the class in general packaging. They are resins, emulsions, polyvinyl acetate emulsion, and they form a stable suspension. Like polyvinyl acetate emulsion, they form a stable suspension when they are suspended in water. Next type is an hot melt adhesives. This is the fastest growing class in packaging for last 25 years. Most of the volume goes into the high speed large volume case and carton sealing, that is the secondary packaging. They may be defined as 100% solid adhesive based on thermoplastic polymers that are applied when heated in molten state and they are set to bond or solidify on cooling. Their chief attraction is that they have extremely rapid rate of bond formation, and this can be helpful in a high production rate in the packaging line. The backbone of any hot melt procedure or adhesive is the type of the polymer used. So this generally uses a thermoplastic polymer. So most widely used copolymer is ethylene and vinyl acetate or EVA. The next type of adhesive is a solvent-borne adhesive, which are used in specialized application where waterborne or hot melt will not meet the technical requirement. So rubber resin solution are used for pressure sensitive adhesives like labels and the tapes. Factors like cost, safety, productivity, compliance, they are more in case of waterborne or hot melt alternatives. So these are rarely used adhesives. And the solvented polyurethane adhesives are used for lamination of the plastic films around the packaging material. Then the multi-layer film construction find application in the bags and the pouches which are used in the packaging. Next part is the printing inks. They are colored liquids or paste which are formulated to transfer and reproduce an image on the surface. So they are generally used to convey the message and provide protection. However, also a means to decorate and identify a product. So printing inks are used on paper, board, plastic, glass, textile surface. Next we come to the raw materials which are used in ink. So the primary agent or the material used is the color forming agent. So they are pigments and dye which are important, and they convey the visual identity of the ink. That is, they give an color to the uh, solution. The vehicle will act as a carrier. Resins, varnishes, oils will improve the printing performance. Solvents are used to disperse the liquid part and to improve the viscosity and control the drying speed. Other additives include the plasticizers, the dryers, waxes, antioxidants, surfactants, and wetting agents. We come to the types of inks which are used in printing. So we have UV and water-based inks, toluene-free, universal ink, thermochromic inks, and fresh check systems.